All right. Hi. Welcome along. Thank you for joining us for our first time buyers webinar today. My name is Karen and I'm with the marketing team at ESPC. On our panel today for the Q&A is Shirley from Mortgages. We also have Laura from Dean's Properties and Ash, who is also from ESPC and will be giving us our market update, especially looking at the first time buyers. We have tried our best to condense the questions as much as possible. We got a nice number through. So if you feel like there's something that we've missed or you'd like us to expand on a little bit more, please feel free to just pop it in the Q&A box and we'll do our best to get round to that at the very end. And we do have a survey at the end of the webinar as well. So if you could do us a favour and please fill that out, that makes sure that these events are exactly how you'd like them to be. So let's start off with Ash, who will give us our market update.
Hi everyone, thanks so much Karen. As Karen just said, welcome to our first time buyer event. We know this is a really exciting journey for you all. Looking to secure your first home. It can be extremely exciting, extremely nerve-wracking, and we're here to help you as much as we can with any advice and questions that you have. So yeah, I guess we've got the right people here to give you that advice through from your mortgage affordability to help when you're putting through an offer and just really what to expect along the way. So as Karen mentioned, I'm just going to run through some stats with you on how the market has been performing. We can pop these out to you. There's quite a lot of stats in here. And if you need any further advice, you can find the house price report on espc.com, or you can equally speak to one of our panel if you have anything specific in mind. So I'm just going to run you through the last quarter. We're just going to look through some key data that we have recorded from February through to April in 2022. And we're just going to compare that to the same time frame as last year as well. So just to confirm, these are all averages, so they can definitely differ from area to area, but we will be having a look at some of the affordable places that you might be able to find yourself your first property and run you through some of those stats. So yeah, the last quarter, when we're looking at February to April, for Edinburgh, the Lothians, Fife and also the Borders, it presented a picture of the market cooling off ever so slightly when we look at it compared to last year. And we can see the stats starting to return to those kind of pre-pandemic levels. If we do compare the stats to the previous year of February to April 2021, at that point we had a second national lockdown, which was heavily impacted by market activity. And we can see that volume of both sales and new properties coming to the market has begun to kind of reach those more normal levels as such. So during this quarter, when we have a look at sales volume, so this is all the properties that are being sold that we're recording through ESPC across Edinburgh, Lothians, Fife and the Borders, was actually reduced by 21.2%. And we did see new properties coming onto the market kind of dropped by about 6.5% year on year, so compared to last year. But I'm just going to pull out some like kind of key kind of headline figures for you at different areas that might be more affordable for first time buyers, or some areas that we know can prove to be quite popular. So in terms of sales volumes, we had 2-bedroom flats in Newington that sold the most in this time frame for that last quarter. We are seeing high volumes coming on in this area, and the average selling price for a 2-bed flat in Newington is sitting at £276,000. We always see Leith as being one of those really, really popular areas. So we always see 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom flats seem to dominate the sales market for the last couple of years. We have seen a slight drop in that. I think it's actually been by about 50% of the sales coming through there. And that's kind of hinting that and you know, it's kind of leveling off after a little bit after 2 years of really intense activity, with 16.5% less properties coming to market than last year. But we are still seeing a lot of properties come on in that area, so that's definitely still a really good place to look. Average selling prices for a 2-bed in Leith is currently sitting at £231,000 for that last quarter, and a 1-bed is sitting at 162. So again, making those areas quite affordable for your first potential home. One that we did see that's quite interesting is Dunfermline saw a really, really high amount of properties for sale during this time. Perhaps giving you more choice if you are perhaps looking to commute, if you're looking to work or travel into the city. and a 2-bedroom flat averaging about £96,000 in Dunfermline, which is really affordable and also a great option as well. So when we have a look at how much properties are going for and how much buyers are paying on average within that time frame, it's sitting at 106.6%. So what that means is above the home report valuation is it's going for on average 6.6% over. So this is the money that you'd have to have out of your own back pocket to try and secure that home. This might have been driven up by certain things, like for instance, properties are selling at the moment in an average about 16 days, which is pretty quick. And we have about 35% of properties that are actually coming to market that are going to closing dates, which tend to drive that up a little bit as well. So all areas at the moment, we're seeing a rise in terms of amount paid over home report valuation. But we can see that there's some areas that might appeal to some first-time buyers that are going below that average. So for instance, a 1-bed flat in Portobello for the last quarter is going for 2.6% over home report valuation on average, and the average selling price there is £147,000. A 1-bed flat in Fountain Bridge is going for 5.6% over home report valuation, and the average selling price there is £203,000. And a 2-bed flat, for instance, in Gorgie is sitting at 5.3% over home report valuation, and the average selling price there is sitting at £227,000. So it's probably safe to say, I'm sure Laura will back me up here, that all properties vary so, significantly. Depends on the area, depends on the house that you're looking at or the flat. So it's definitely worth speaking to your solicitor first and foremost to try and see what kind of indications or get a bit more advice on what you should be putting in when you're offering for a property. Also, there is still fixed price properties out there, which is quite nice because you know exactly how much you are paying and you're not having to essentially bid over that home report. So definitely keep an eye out for them. And we also have all our properties coming on to espc.com, coming on 72 hours before they go to any other portals. So that definitely gives you a chance to view ahead of all the crowds. And yeah, I would definitely suggest signing up for our property alerts. You can put down your saved searches, make sure that you're getting in by property or by price or by area. And anytime that those properties are listed through ESPC, you'll just get pung a little email to let you know that we have those properties coming on to make sure that you get in there first. But all in all, I think in terms of the market, we are still seeing really strong buyer demand, and that is just due to slightly less properties coming onto the market. But there is still really affordable areas out there and prices. So yeah, we just recommend obviously speaking to your mortgage advisor in terms of affordability, and get in touch with your solicitor. I'm sure Laura can help you as well, just to be in the best position when you're starting to look for your dream first flat or your dream first home. That's a lot of stats in there, guys, sorry, but if you do want to find out any more, please just get in contact and we can kind of send that back out to you. Or if there's any kind of areas that you're looking at, please just get in touch and I'm sure one of us can help you out. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ash. Yeah, please feel free to reach out to us at ESPC. Contact us at marketing@espc.com and we can put you in touch with the relevant person. For those who are just joining us, hello. We're going to move on to our Q&A section now. And just a reminder, please feel free to drop a question in our Q&A box if you want us to expand on anything, or if there's something you feel we haven't covered, we can do our best to get round to that before the end of the webinar today. So let's start with our Q&A, and the first question is for Laura. When should you contact a solicitor estate agent and why?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. Great question to start with. Quite a big question, in fairness. I could probably talk a long time about this, but I'll try and summarise. I think you would want to contact your solicitor and mortgage broker before you find that property that you want to make an offer on. You want to be in the best possible position you could be in, and you'll be able to tap into that invaluable advice and experience that professionals have. There are lots of things that we will be able to sort of cut through the legal jargon. You'll start hearing words about missives, conveyancing, terms in the home report that you may not be familiar with. And it's something that we deal with obviously on a daily basis, where we're constantly offering for properties and handling transactions from beginning to end. So speaking to a member firm, and there's lots of us available, you would obviously want to have an initial conversation and try and find someone that you want to work with. You'll realise that the relationship you have with your solicitor is perhaps more intense than you initially thought. You speak to them far more often than you would think, and you will become to rely on them to guide you through what can be a very stressful and difficult process. So, but we're here to help, so don't worry. There's lots of other things that you would want to perhaps discuss, and trying to get that right strategy for the property that you may be interested in. Ash has already mentioned that some properties are marketed at a fixed price, some are offers over, and each buyer and seller has a different set of circumstances. So it's trying to find out the seller's position. How can we work in with their onward plans, make you the most attractive buyer that you can be? Should you note interest? When should you note interest? When's the closing date being set? And these are all things that the solicitor will be able to discuss with you and come up with a tailored strategy to help guide you to secure that property. Now, other things that I generally talk to first-time buyers about are tips for viewings that we kind of learned over the years, and things that may not be that obvious. And I think sometimes in a competitive marketplace, you're maybe not getting the opportunity to view 2 or 3 times. So you're trying to absorb everything you can at the initial viewing, which can be quite pressured. If possible, you might want to take someone along with you who's familiar with the property process or is familiar with looking at properties and home reports. But certainly downloading the home report is the first thing you would do. You want to have a scan through it, see if anything jumps out that you're unsure of, flag and discuss that with the solicitor, and certainly bring it up at the viewing if you're unsure, perhaps there's been recent repairs or there's damp works to do and so on. Okay. You may want to view at a different time of the day or night. Is the street going to be a bit busier in the evening? Will you have difficulty parking? Is it noisy in the stair? All of these things might be things worth considering and trying to take in an initial viewing. Now, the other thing that I was going to mention was simply about budgeting. Obviously, you'll all be considering your deposits, and we'll be discussing that sort of later on. The other thing that you want to consider are fees, outlays. What other things will you have to cost for? And you want to get a breakdown of those before you maybe start the process so you can budget accordingly. Now, SPC member firms, generally, we will place notes of interest for as many properties as you require. You don't need to note interest for one property at a time. Likewise, we don't charge for unsuccessful offers because we realise that quite often you won't secure your first property, or you're very lucky if you secure the first property you're offer for. So finding out this information right at the beginning is terribly important. I would get a breakdown of the costs. I would also ask if there will be any additional outlays. I know some firms will charge if there's a gifter involved. Will there be additional anti-money laundering checks that will be required? So it's helpful to know this information at the outset so you're best informed. Now, I think being organised, having the facts to hand and having professionals on your side is the best advice when you're at the initial stages of looking at your first property. But be prepared. The more preparation you do, the more confident you'll feel, and the more times you're having conversations about it with professionals or friends, you'll feel more confident going forward with the process.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. And the second question is for both Shirley and Laura. What can I do to prepare for my first meeting with a mortgage advisor and solicitor?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first on that one. Obviously, Laura's already mentioned quite a few good points about why should you get in contact with your solicitor, and absolutely, I totally agree. Don't hesitate to contact us at ESPC Mortgages and as well a solicitor like Laura. In terms of general sort of tips and information, things that you can prepare up front to get you in a good position, documentation. I see this on a regular basis that first-time buyers have perhaps kept their documentation, things like their name and address, in a previous address, especially their parents' address and their home address, and then maybe moved into university accommodation or rental accommodation, and everything is still registered at mum and dad's. Lenders need to know who you are and be able to identify you. They need to know you are the correct person that's applying for that mortgage and it's not a fraudulent application. So having things like your driving license in date, often see those as having expired, so check your driving license, correct name and address. Your address is on your driving license and that needs to be the correct address. So ID is important. Passports in date as well with your correct name. You know, have you had a change of name? How, you know, have you got married and changed your name? Make sure that it's the correct name and address in date on your ID. Likewise, wage slips. Is it the correct name? Is it the correct address? Bank statement, correct name, correct address. You're getting the theme here. Make sure that everything is registered at your current address, or it leads to issues further down the line. You start scrabbling around for the correct documentation to prove you are who you say you are and you are resident at that address. Make sure things like any credit agreements are also registered at your address. Electoral roll is a fantastic way to again identify you. If you go onto your credit report, you see it's one of the things that they say would boost your credit score. And likewise with a lender, you will get some additional credit points for having being registered on the electoral roll. Again, it shows you being at a current address. I mentioned credit. Credit is a good way for the lender, a lender, to know you know, how you're performing, how you've performed already with any sort of credit agreements. It's like your financial CV, and they will go out to different credit agencies to look at that financial CV. So the likes of your Experian, your Equifaxes, your TransUnions, and some of them will use multiple agencies to check your credit history. And beware, a lot of people get credit score and credit history mixed up. They're not necessarily the same. Lenders will go into your credit report looking for what they want to identify. So sometimes credit score isn't always the be all and end all of what a lender is looking to pick up, and each lender differs in terms of what they're looking to pick up. So what I would say is check your credit report. Make sure there is nothing incorrectly registered against you, because I see this quite commonly, especially with things like utility companies registering incorrect credit against people that have perhaps not even been customers. So make sure that everything that is on your credit report is correct. And if it is not, take it up with either the company that has registered it, or indeed the credit agency that's providing the report. Make sure that you keep your payments up to date. So any credit agreements that you have, make sure that you do not miss any payments, no defaults. Again, these are black marks against you, and as a first-time buyer, not what you want. No credit isn't necessarily good credit. As I said already, this is your financial CV. Lenders want to know that you can handle credit. So actually having a credit card that you put a small amount onto each month and pay it off is actually a really good idea. It gives you that footprint, and it shows that you can be responsible. On the flip side of this, not too much credit. You don't want too much available credit, so no big credit limits on credit cards, because lenders see it as available credit, you know, monies that are available to you and could potentially affect you being able to pay for a mortgage. And the other thing is your overdraft. Keep out your overdraft. I see a lot of people coming in using their overdraft facility, and lenders do not like it. They see it as a lack of resilience. You know, what would you do if something happened? Where's your emergency pot of money should the boiler go, or the roof leak, or, you know, and how do you then also pay for your mortgage? So you see it as lack of resilience and a risk factor, and some will also take it into account in terms of affordability. So keep out your overdraft, and we will ask for your bank statements as part of a mortgage application process. So, you know, it will flag if during the process. So yeah, make sure you keep well out of it before you apply for a mortgage. So yeah, certainly that's some of my tips, initial tips.
So I might just jump in there. There's a couple of things. I mean, obviously when clients contact us, as Shirley said, we obviously want to know about your identification documentation to pass the AML checks. So we want to have that in place. We'll also start asking you about source of fund where's that money coming from for your deposit? We need to know that at the outset. So when we're framing your offer, we're giving enough relevant information. Okay, do you have your decision in principle from your mortgage lender? If not, the next step is to speak to a broker to have that available, because that will strengthen your offer going forward. Now, one thing that is quite important and it comes up a lot is gifts. Gifted deposits are really important. Lots of people are receiving gifts at the moment. Lenders will want that to be disclosed. We must disclose that to them. But you also need to speak to the gifter to make sure they are aware that we will be speaking to them. We'll need to do anti-money laundering checks. We'll also need to certify their funding. Where is that source of wealth from? How is that originated? And we'll need to do audit trails. So it's making sure your gifters are aware of that as well at the outset, so we're not spraying something on them later on.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Another question, and this one's for Laura this time. What questions should we ask a property developer if we want to purchase a new build? And where can I check a developer's credibility and previous customer reviews?
Okay, so like buying any property, you will have lots of questions. The opportunity to have a lot of these answered by the sales team at the development, they should have a lot of information to hand, but obviously you would want to try and verify that with a third party. So I think the first thing is, it links back to the initial question, speak to your solicitor. They will likely have been involved in purchasing within the development, or certainly may have other parties within the firm who have bought there. So you might be able to get some quick information quite quickly from them. Now, there's other things to consider with a developer in a new build. What size is the seller? What size is the builder? Is it a really big firm that you're going to be buying from? And if that's the case, then you may have the opportunity to benefit from NHBC warranty, which is the National House Builders Council. So that's important because some lenders will insist on that, or similar, like a Premier guarantee. This may not be available to smaller developers, and you may be looking to proceed by way of an architect certificate. And that again is something that you would want to pass back to the broker to check the lender that you intend to use is satisfied with that, or indeed if it has to be NHBC. Okay. It's very difficult. Big builders at the moment have probably more resources in terms of pulling in materials and labour. These are things to consider about timescales for completing a development. Whereas smaller developers may not have the same buying power, but you may have the opportunity to tailor the purchase, the property to your own specific needs. There might be more options for extras. So there's lots of things to consider. Online reviews are obviously great, and you could potentially, if you're at a development, even speak to someone else bought within the development. They may be willing to have a quick chat with you about how they felt the process went when they were buying their home and if they like living in the development. So there's lots of things to do, but I think the first thing is to talk to your solicitor about the development you're interested in and see what information they have or can obtain.
Brilliant, thank you. Shirley, my next question's for yourself. How does a deposit work in relation to offers over and home report?
Okay, so obviously in recent times, as Ash certainly described at the beginning of this, we are seeing a buoyant market. We are still seeing a buoyant market where properties are going for over the home report value. The way in which a lender will base the mortgage, so you will have heard loan to value described. So it's how much money you are borrowing against the value of the property. The value part of that is the lower of the purchase price or the home report value. And this is commonly misunderstood. You will not get a mortgage on the purchase price. That additional money above the home report value has to come out your own pot. So let's take an example. On a property with a home report of 200,000, and let's say you're lucky enough to secure a purchase price of 200,000, so the same as a home report, and you have a pot of money available, excluding the fees. Obviously, Laura's alluded to the fees that you have to take into account when purchasing a property. But let's say the pot of money, excluding the fees, is 20,000. So 20,000 on that 200,000 home report and purchase price is 10% deposit, and as such a 90% loan to value mortgage. Okay, let's take that same property. However, there's a queue of people looking at it, and it's going to a closing date, and you know that you're going to have to bid over the home report value to purchase this property. You really like it. So that same pot of money, you decide to put £10,000 towards your offer, your purchase price for it, and you're successful, fantastic. Okay, but that 10,000 of your 20 has to come out of your pot, and then that remaining 10 goes towards your deposit, and you are then in a position that you are at a 95% loan to value mortgage, because that 10% equates to 5% deposit. Okay, if you're lucky enough to pay under the home report value, so you get that £200,000 property for 190,000, the value that the deposit is based on, the mortgage is based on 190,000. So it's always the lower of the purchase price or the home report. It's a really important point to know. Just while we're talking about high loan to value mortgages, some lenders will not lend at high loan to values on certain properties. For example, a lot of lenders will not lend on flats at, say, 95%. There are still some more lenders out there that will lend at 95, but it reduces the amount of them that are available. Likewise, new homes and new flats, new builds that we've just touched on, those can have certain loan to value restrictions from certain lenders. So always worth chatting it through. Come and speak to us if you think the property is a bit quirky. And the thing is, the more hurdles that you put up, so say that perhaps you've got some quirky income, and you're also looking at high loan to value, it could knock out a few lenders for you. So always worth chatting it through.
Brilliant, thank you, Shirley. Next, our question is for Laura. How can a single buyer who does not have help for a deposit give themselves the best chance of buying a property in Scotland?
Okay, so yeah, being a purchaser at the moment is tough. First-time buyers across the border are finding it tricky just now, for lots of the reasons that we've mentioned before. The market is competitive. There's a shortage of stock available just now, and obviously lending criteria too. So I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about being organised. Knowing what you're looking for, talking to the solicitor, getting a tailored strategy. Are there things that you might be willing to compromise? Have you considered different areas that more properties may be coming up on that you could go and have a look at? I think it's about sitting down and working out, and some clients have lots of different spreadsheets that they have on the go to work about if there are compromises they could make. Are there things they could do in terms of affordability in their own lifestyles to try and adjust things, which I know is very difficult at the moment. Everyone's got an uphill struggle with cost of living and so on, but there may be things that we can think of or Shirley can think of that might be able to help your situation to put you in a slightly better position. In terms of ISAs as well, there's the Help to Buy ISA, so people might be able to benefit from that too. So it's just about considering all the options, but again, it's always about being prepared, knowing what you're looking for and discussing matters and getting a tailored strategy going forward.
Thank you. Shirley, my next question is for you. What is the minimum income to buy a property? Oh, I think Shirley might have frozen.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Some lenders. Oh, have I?
No, you're fine. It turns out it's just your
Frozen?
screen. It's just your screen.
Oh, yeah. Okay, right. Hopefully you can hear me. So minimum income on a residential property. Lenders, a lot of lenders don't actually specify a minimum income for a residential property. However, you have to be able to afford it. I certainly would not want to put you in a position of getting your mortgage that you can't afford. You need to be able to live and and be able to pay for your mortgage. So the way in which most lenders undertake it is by looking at your affordability is by doing calculators, and each lender differs in the way that they calculate your affordability, and that is something we can help you with. The general factors that they all take into account, obviously your income. Your income is the biggest factor that will help you out with affordability and how much you can borrow. Generally speaking, the more you earn, the more you can borrow, and also the length of time that you take your mortgage over, otherwise known as the term of the mortgage. Traditionally that was 25 years. We're now seeing 30, 35, even 40-year terms. And this can, because it's stretching out how much you're borrowing the money over, it can help with actually increasing how much you can borrow. Actually, the lower your loan to value, the more that you're putting in as a deposit, can also help your affordability. Some lenders are prepared to offer you slightly more because they've got less at risk if you put more of a deposit in. The elements that are going to reduce your affordability are things like credit commitments. We've already spoke about these. So loans, PCPs, any sort of car finance, those credit cards, student loans. Common misperception that student loans are not taken into account. They are, either as a reduction in your net income or as a credit commitment. Just touching on credit cards, people think that if they say, oh, I'm just going to pay that off before the mortgage starts, that will help their affordability, and more lenders do not like this. They, if you're showing a historical balance of credit, a credit card balance, a lot of lenders are taking it into account, especially at high loan to value. So even if it's showing on even if you've paid it off and it's still showing on your credit report, they will still take it into account. So be careful with that type of thinking. The other thing that will potentially reduce your affordability are financial dependence. Those are normally children, and unfortunately children are expensive luxury items, and can reduce your affordability. The expenses related to children as well, things like nursery costs, childcare, educational fees, those can all reduce your affordability as well. So lots of different factors that make up what you can potentially borrow, and it's, again, I would encourage you to come in and speak to us. We can run through affordability. We can have an initial chat to discuss your circumstances and see if it's something we can work with.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shirley. Laura, the next question's for you. As a first-time buyer, do you recommend that we go for a new build?
Okay, so whilst buyers can be categorized, first-time buyers, people who are wanting to downsize, I think each buyer, as an individual, got their own set of needs. I wouldn't really recommend a blanket approach to that. I think you need to sit down and think about what your priorities are. Is it the right thing for you to do to look for a new build? And there's lots of things to consider. I think one of the things with a new build is, when's this new build ready? Is it ready just now, or is it going to be ready in 6 months, a year's time? Are you going to be continuing to pay rent during that period? What's going to happen to interest rates? So things like that to consider. Is it further out of town? Will you be traveling into work every day? Have you got additional costs that you need to think about too? So I can see the appeal with lots of people looking to new builds at the moment. Obviously, there's lots of developments in and around Edinburgh that are proving to be extremely popular. You're getting perhaps a wee bit more space, and you've got that home office availability. You might get a bit of garden too, which are all the things that we're seeing post sort of pandemic that are really appealing to people. I think that, coupled with the fact what you're paying for the property, you're not going through the stress and perhaps the disappointment of several closing dates and being unsuccessful. You don't have to pay over the value, because more often than not, with the new build, you are paying the value for the property, and therefore you're saving. And that means you can keep that valuable money back for perhaps soft furnishings, or you want to use that for your fees or whatever. So the price is important. Timescale, when will it be ready, is also important and should be taken into consideration. I would also suggest that you think about where you want to be in the next few years. Is this a long-term purchase, or is this something that you want to try and move on in a couple of years? Because traditionally, perhaps new builds didn't see the increase in the market as perhaps some of the more traditional buildings sort of towards town have done. So I think there's Also, the other thing, I suppose, and quite an important factor that's been discussed hotly at the moment is energy performance. New builds should be more energy efficient, and that is having an impact on people's decision making about the future, where we can see energy prices increasing continually at the moment, which is obviously a stressful time for all. But yeah, new builds should be better insulated, and you won't have any renovation costs because the work's done for you. Because at the moment, trying to find a builder and materials can be quite tricky for people who are undertaking renovation projects. So there's lots of things to be positive about a new build. You just need to consider if that's the right thing for you to do and the timescales involved in securing it.
Just on the new build, just to add to that, there's then a scheme called the Deposit Unlock Scheme at the moment, which lenders are taking, some lenders are taking part in and some builders are taking part in. So I mentioned previously about new builds, not a lot of lenders like high loan to values on new build property, where this scheme is a 95% loan to value scheme for new builds, which is quite unusual in new build houses. So, for first time buyers interested in a new build, that's quite an interesting space. And there was something else I was going to mention on new builds.
Yeah, I think I was also going to mention, I think the deposit can vary, for new builds dependent on what the house is. So it's something to consider before maybe putting down that reservation fee with the builder. Will you be able to get the mortgage that you think you can? Because a lot of people put down a reservation fee, which may be £500, based on the fact they've got a decision in principle, which you think is 95%. You might not be able to get the 95% on that particular property. So it's to suss that out before you share your money with the developer, okay? Because they will ask for a reservation fee, and then they'll ask to conclude misses quite quickly, generally within maybe 8 weeks. And thereafter they'll look for a further deposit once misses are concluded. So you need to be aware of those things too. The sales office should talk you through it, but it's just those things to consider having the money available.
Yeah. The costs involved, the additional costs involved in new builds as well. Just make sure you know what you're getting for your money, because we see clients obviously really rack up for things like flooring or grass or kitchens or all the additional wardrobes or whatever. Make sure you understand what you will have to pay for on top of that new build property.
Yeah, and I think the factoring as well for new builds, quite often that's not necessarily discussed by the sales team. So if you're potentially buying a new build flatted property, it could be quite high cost in terms of factoring if there's block policies involved. Maybe there's going to be a lift in the development as well, and they can be quite costly to run. So factoring costs can be something that you should consider about affordability going forward too.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really informative, and apologies if you guys heard my buzzer going off in the background. That was very distracting. So our final question of the submitted questions is for Shirley, and just a little note to those who are joining us today, this is a good time to get in any last minute questions before we finish up. We do have a couple, so we'll try and get as much covered as possible. But the final of our pre-submitted questions are, how do your mortgage options differ when you choose to take the mortgage out for 40 years compared to 25?
Okay, right. I'll cover this actually in two parts. I'll cover term and how term differs and how that changes your mortgage, and I'll cover mortgage options a little bit as well, especially with this being a first-time buyer event. So the longer you take your mortgage over, it spreads the payments over that longer period of time. So what that effectively should do is bring down your monthly payments. Okay, so that sounds really nice. Oh, take as long a term as possible and bring down my monthly payments. However, the flip side is that you will pay more interest over the term of that mortgage. The other downside to it is we highly recommend that you get life and critical illness cover to cover you for this mortgage. It's a big undertaking, and you want to make sure that, in the unfortunate event that you either pass away or you get a critical illness, that your mortgage would be paid off. And that's what these policies are for. The longer that you have these life and critical illness policies for, obviously the older you get, and the more the likelihood of you suffering a critical illness, etc., becomes a higher risk. So these policies can go up as well. So that's a downside. Obviously, you know, the benefit that we did talk about, bringing down your monthly payment, is quite nice. And if you feel that you've got additional monies, most of these mortgages, well, most of these mainstream mortgages offer what's called an overpayment facility, which is a 10% allowance on the loan amount that's outstanding that you can repay into your mortgage to bring your balance down. And what you could do is at a point of review, have a look to see if you can then bring your term down at that point. So I always think that's quite a nice facility that a lot of people overlook on their mortgage, the overpayment facility. In terms of options at the moment, unfortunately there is a sort of lack of first-time buyer help out there. You know, we still get a lot of inquiries about the First Home Fund. Unfortunately, you know, that dried up. It's no longer available. It doesn't look like it's coming back anytime soon. Help to Buy ISAs were fantastic as well, really incentivizing people to save, as well as, you know, getting that extra money. Unfortunately, that scheme's closed too, albeit you can still use one if you have opened one up. On the positive, you know, we've mentioned that 95% deposit on lock scheme for new builds. That's certainly out there. The LIF scheme, albeit I realise that it's a really awkward scheme to use. It's quite clunky, and you need the property value and the purchase price to be one and the same. You cannot pay more for the property, which at the moment makes that scheme quite unuser friendly. There are shared ownership schemes, the Golden Share scheme, for example. The Golden Share scheme, for example, is still open. There are things called, on the mortgage front, joint borrower, sole proprietor and guarantor mortgages, where family members can help you out in terms of affordability. So they can be on the mortgage but not on the title, and help you in terms of affordability. So those types of schemes are there. There's also mortgage products which allow family members to put a deposit down for you that is held until you gain enough equity within your own property for that to be released. So there are different options out there, and hopefully I've explained the difference between term and some giving you some mortgage options as well there, or schemes.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Okay, so we have time for a few more questions. So the first one we have here is, if someone who owns a third part of a property abroad, do they still qualify to be a first-time buyer?
Hi, I'll take that one. So no, I think you have to be really careful if you own or have a share in another property anywhere in the world, because here in Scotland, you would be liable to what's called ADS, which is Additional Dwelling Tax Supplement, and that is levied at 4% of a purchase price. So it's quite a consideration to pay. It's not tapered in any way. It's a flat 4% on top of the land building transaction tax you're already paying. So you wouldn't, in those terms, be classed as a first-time buyer, and you would have additional tax to pay. There may be talks within the family, perhaps, that you would want to perhaps transfer that share, if that was the right course of action for you, to allow you to then proceed here in Scotland without the additional dwelling tax supplement. But even being overseas doesn't avoid the tax that's payable.
Brilliant, thank you. And how do you find a good free beneficial advisor and solicitor? It's one of the questions.
Here?
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got any queries or questions, I'm sure Shirley and myself be happy to answer those. Our initial consultations, you know, are there's no charge for them. It's always good to have an initial conversation. Many buyers want to talk to a couple of firms before they make a decision. That's also sort of standard practice. But the consultation, there's no payment. We don't ask for any funds to be paid to us until perhaps just before you're settling the transaction, which could be 8-12 weeks away. So you're getting all of this knowledge and advice for free at the moment.
Brilliant. Okay, and I think we've got time for one more
Yeah, I
question.
suppose likewise, we do our
Sorry, Shirley, there was a delay. Go ahead.
oh. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add on to Laura, just to say that our initial consultations are free. We do charge a fee, but we discount it for first-time buyers. Normally our fee is £350. This is discounted to £295 for our first-time buyers. But yeah, initial consultations are free of charge.
Brilliant, thank you. And our final question, this question looks as though it has been covered, but I believe this person may be looking for a little more clarity. And this is to do with the mortgage deposit versus offers. And how does this work when it comes to searching and making an offer? And this is specifically geared towards someone with a smaller income and budget, and they do not have any financial help from their family. Does that make sense, or would you like me to read that?
Okay. Yeah. I think so. Again, speak to us about, we can have that initial chat, and then we can get some further information to get you through that affordability exercise. Certainly, we've talked a lot about high loan to values today, and if you've got a low deposit amount, sometimes unfortunately looking at higher loan to value mortgages is a potential for getting you on that property ladder. So minimizing how much of a deposit you need to put down, that 5% deposit, and then anything that you've got left in that pot, you can go over potentially with. So certainly come in and speak, drop us an inquiry into the website, or call us, and we can certainly help you out with that. But yeah, what we can do is help guide you in terms of what is it that is affordable, and as such, what sort of property prices are you looking at. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think the key is get in touch with us. We're more than happy to help, and that goes for get in touch with Laura or Shirley, or more genetically ESPC. So contact us at marketing@espc.com, and our website is full of information as well. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us today, and of course your questions. We've had some really fantastic discussions here, and we hope it's been as informative as possible. Please keep an eye out for any future webinars we're holding. It's always a great place to come and get advice, get your questions answered, especially from the comfort of your own home, which is always lovely. And we do have a survey once this webinar will finish, so you'll see it pop up on your screen, and we'd be very, very grateful if you could fill that out for us. But likewise, thank you for joining us today, and of course thank you to the panel for some amazing knowledge sharing. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.